Hello techies, I'm Divya here. On behalf of CyberBrainer, don't you think the world of tech is evolving faster than ever? Now is the perfect time to dive in and build the skills that will take you places. With CyberBrainer, we are putting you in the driver's seat of your own future. We at CyberBrainer don't just teach your interest. We believe that knowledge is power, but it's applied knowledge that truly sets you apart. Whether you're diving into data science, mastering artificial intelligence, or exploring the world of cybersecurity, our courses are designed to give you the skills that matter. So let's jump into the session and make the future yours today. Thank you.
What are derived datasets? Now we have seen that base datasets. They are created for the purpose of loading data into Workday. Right? Why would I create a base dataset? A base dataset is basically created to extract data into Prism. Right? This data can be extracted from Workday, which is what we did with the 3 base datasets we created. We extracted data from Workday itself using our custom reports. But then we can also extract data from non-Workday sources. That is something we have not seen yet. But then ultimately a base dataset. The purpose of creating a base dataset is to extract or load data into your Prism environment. Now, what is a derived dataset? Or the other question is, why would I create a derived dataset? Now, a derived dataset is used to transform your data or modify your data. Now, when we have extracted data from one or multiple sources, we would be transforming that or modifying that, blending that in our Prism workspace. And that is done through these derived datasets. The second thing, how is derived dataset created? For base dataset, we have seen that it is created using any one of these options. We can create it from a custom report from a file or again from a file from a FTP server. How is derived dataset created? See, your derived dataset is created for the purpose of transforming your data. Where is this data present? This data is already present in your base datasets, right, or other datasets. Because your derived dataset is not bringing in data, it has already been brought into your Prism environment through your datasets, through your base datasets, right? Once again, you have your Prism environment. You have created base datasets to bring external data into your Prism environment. Now you can use these base datasets. You can use other derived datasets to then transform this data. How is a derived dataset created? It is created using other datasets. A derived dataset is based on one or more existing datasets. Right. No derived dataset can access data which is outside Prism environment. They only access data which already exists in one or more existing datasets. These could be base datasets. These could be derived datasets. Derived dataset can be based on another dataset. You mean to say, basically, there is a two type of datasets. Only the one-day report will take the data from either the base datasets or the derived datasets. When I go for the base datasets within the Workday application, and the dataset is nothing but outside the Workday datasets. There is a third category as well, called published, which we will talk about at the end. That is what, as the name suggests, it publishes the data. Final transformed output of your entire Prism use cases. That is what makes the data available for analysis reporting. From the base dataset, you are just getting the raw data. Right from base dataset, I am taking the raw data, derived datasets. I am transforming the data. Published dataset. I am finally publishing my transformed data. As I mentioned, basically the ideal is the source of a derived dataset. Comes from the output of an existing dataset. Right, similar to how we saw that the source of a base dataset is either a custom report, is a file, is an SFTP file. Similarly, the source of a derived dataset, it is basically the output of an existing dataset. Now, what do I mean by output of an existing dataset? We will explore this in a bit more detail as we create our derived dataset. Now, what did I mention? The purpose of a derived dataset. It is to transform and blend and modify the data. The use. Why would I create a derived dataset? The use of a derived dataset is to blend or transform or modify whatever you want to call it. We can combine the data together from different sources. Let's go into the system. Data catalog report. These were the three base datasets. Excuse me. That we had created. Now, how do I create a derived dataset? Again, I would go to the create option and I can now create a derived dataset. Derived dataset is again created using your create button, but by clicking on the derived dataset option. I am selecting a derived dataset. Now when I select a derived dataset, if you see, a derived dataset allows me to bring data and modify data which is coming from different sources. What are these different sources? These are your existing datasets. When I go try creating a derived dataset, what Workday is showing me is all the existing datasets and tables. A table concept we have not seen yet. That is something we'll look at later, but exactly similar to a dataset. I'll talk about that when we are at the end. It is a dataset, but a dataset is nothing. But again, the work-based data only, right? Right, exactly. Now what I'll do is let me cancel this. We have already created 3 datasets. When I create a derived dataset, now I am going to select the datasets that I have already created. If you see all the 3 datasets that I created last time, they are available for me and I can select them. Start with the company details. Now my company details. If you remember, it has the details of the company for an employee. Let me go ahead and open duplicate tab and run this report and show you what data is there actually. This dataset is already created, right? Do we require to create a derived dataset? Yes, we have to, because we have to transform the data, right? We have now created 3 different base datasets. Our data is spread across 3 different datasets. I have to bring my understanding from you that the base dataset or the derived dataset, it's fine, right? We don't need to create a database. According to you, you have to create a first base dataset. After that, you have to move into a derived dataset. Then we have to do the transform, and then we'll go for the publishing. Yes. Let me show you what I'm trying to achieve. Now, if you see, I have brought data using 3 different reports, and I have created 3 different base datasets. What is there in these base datasets? The first base is dataset, which is company details. It basically has this data. We saw this last time. It has details of all of my different companies and the sectors that these companies belong. My second dataset has the supervisory structure. Here it basically identifies what are the different organizations in a given company or in a given sector. If you see, for example, if I take North America or let's say EMEA as an example, this company belongs to this sector called energy. Right. If I go in here, if you see energy, this organization which has a head count of 98. Right. It belongs to this sector called energy. Right? A company can have multiple organizations. Organizations are your business units, your departments, your teams, your projects. Here I have the company details, which is my high-level details, in one table or one report which I have brought into my first dataset here. My supervisory structure, which is basically the headcount. And if you see, it shows me the headcount for the current year, current fiscal year, the last fiscal year, which is FY-1, and the fiscal year prior to that, FY-2. Which means in 2018, the headcount of sales and marketing was 71.5. Last year, 2019, it was 92, and current fiscal year, it is 98. This second report, it is getting me data saying for each of these sectors, what is the organization those sectors are includes, but also what is the respective headcount of those organizations. And the third dataset, it basically has the details at the granularity of an individual employee. Here, if I again take sales and marketing as an example, let's filter on sales and marketing. These are the individual employees who are part of that sales and marketing. My third dataset on my third report, it includes details of the individual employees, and it includes details like their gender, their hire date, their age group, their basic salary, their management level, the currency, their location, their country, and on and forth. We'll see. I have data in 3 different reports or 3 different sources. At the first level, I have the top level company data and the sectors that those companies belong to. Then each of those sectors, I have the respective organizations, and then in each of those organizations, if you can see the link now, the sector here actually links to these subtypes here. This is how I would know which of these organizations belongs to which company. The common criteria which allows me to link these different sectors to to these different companies, to different organizations, is this. And now from these organizations, I would also know which employees belong to them. This common link is what I would utilize to finally bring all of this data together. This data, which is currently spread across the 3 different reports or 3 different sources. I would finally bring all of that data together. Right now I have all data, but it is spread across different sources. That's why I have to create a derived dataset, because ultimately I have to bring that data together. Now for each of these 3 reports, if you see, I have created 3 separate base data sets. Right. The next task of mine is to create a derived dataset. I'll create one. I would select Jan 5th. I might at my top level. If you see, I have my company for each of these companies through this sector. I would then identify the respective organizations, and for each of these organizations, then I link them to their respective workers. This is how I would bring all of this data together. The first level is my company. I'm creating my derived data set using your company as the source. I'm selecting that. Alright, it would ask me for a name. I'm calling it Obijan. It is. I would name it as DDS. This is my first data set. Simply call it at level 1, and I'll call it company details. I'll assign the same tag, the one we created last time. This is what allows us, or would help us, to group related data sets together and see. This would go ahead and create our derived data set. Let me go back to the data catalog. What I'll do is I would open this base data set. Let me view this in new tab, but also this derived data set. Let's see what is there in this base data set and this derived data set. First, let's look at the base data set. This base data set, if you remember, we created using our Workday report, and this is the Workday report we had used. This Workday report, if you remember, these are the 5 fields it has, and the same fields gets copied into our base data set. Plus, Workday had added 2 fields, load ID and load timestamp. This base data set basically has the same data as my custom report. Right? Except for 2 extra fields, which Workday automatically added load ID and load timestamp. Now what I have done, I have taken this base data set and then used it to create my derived data set. This is my derived data set, which I just created DDS1. But this derived data set, if you see it, simply has all the fields which are coming from the base data set. At this point in time, all I have done is I have simply read the data from my base data set. Right? It simply has all the fields or all the data which already was there in my base data set. If it is, sometimes we decide that in the database data set, I don't want to sum of the fields. We can modify that. We can do that. We can remove some of the fields. I'll show that as well. Right now, let me show this. If I go to the additional actions on the derived data set, which I just created, and view lineage, We spoke about lineage, if you remember. Now if you see, we have created a lineage. It has in this lineage this derived data set that I just created. It is based on, or I can put it the other way. It is created using this base data set. This is my downstream system, which is getting its data from this base data set. It has created a lineage for us. Alright, this is how your lineage gets created. What is the lineage? It is simply a linking between different data sets. Right, because I created this derived data set. From this base data set, it has created a lineage. Now, in addition to lineage, it creates the few other things. The first thing when you create any data set that gets created is called a pipeline. What I'll do is I'll edit this derived data set which I have created just now. Here I have the edit button. I can either click on edit button here or directly here. I can go to the right click and click on edit. Both of them would take me to the same place. I am clicking on edit. This is my derived dataset TDSA1. Similarly, this is my base dataset. Let me click on edit. Every dataset, as I mentioned, the moment you create any dataset, Workday adds a pipeline. Here, if you see there is a pipeline. And here as well. I have just created this derived dataset. I didn't do anything. I simply select it. This derived dataset would be derived using this base dataset and Workday. If you see, has automatically added a pipeline. The question is, what is a pipeline? If you think about in generic terms, a pipeline is what gets you water. Right, pipeline, simply put, is the source of your data. Right, once again, if I have to put it the other way, when I create any data set, I am importing data into that data set. Right? And when I'm importing data into that data set, I would do that with the help of a pipeline. Right, in this base data set, I imported data through my custom report. Workday has created a pipeline for me. Right? And in this case, the data was you getting imported through a custom report. In this derived data set, I then imported data from my base data set. Again, Workday has established a pipeline for me, which is my primary pipeline. Alright, let's explore these pipelines in a bit more detail. Your datasets. Right? Or if I have to put it the other way, when datasets are created, Workday automatically creates a pipeline. Alright, the second thing, a base dataset. Can contain only one pipeline. In a base dataset, you can only have one pipeline. Alright, on the other hand, a derived dataset is created. Exactly, it's a base dataset. However, in a base dataset, you can only have one pipeline, not more than one. A derived dataset can have one or more pipelines. Right, in a derived dataset, you can have multiple pipelines. In a base dataset, you can only have one pipeline. You can also know that because in this base dataset, if you see, I have the option, or this is the primary pipeline that I have. I don't have an option to change it. However, in this derived dataset, Workday gives me an additional button. And the reason for that is in derived dataset, I can have multiple pipelines. And that's why you have this button called Change Pipeline automatically added in a base dataset. You don't have any button added. Now, when you the first pipeline, as I mentioned, when data sets are created, Workday automatically creates a pipeline. And this pipeline, which Workday automatically creates, is called a primary pipeline. Right? Because this pipeline got created when your data set was created. Obviously, that is my pipeline, and that is what you see. The primary pipeline. As I mentioned in a derived data set, in addition to the primary pipeline, you can add more pipelines. Right? Let's add more pipelines. Now, if you see, I have imported the company details. I want to blend it, or with the organization details as well. Right? I've already imported my company details into this derived data set. I also want to import the supervisory details, which is, if you see, is present in this base data set. Right. What I'll do is I would click on adding a stage. A pipeline, if you see, is a collection of different stages. If I see, in this pipeline there is one stage which is automatically added, which is import. Right? What did I say? A pipeline is. It is basically getting data. If you see, how did this data come from? This data came from the import of this base data set. A pipeline in turn, if I have to define a pipeline is a collection of stages. There is already one state added import. In base data set, there is a stage called pass. What is this pass stage? We'll talk about that in a bit. And I can add more stages. Similarly, in this derived data set as well, I can add more stages. What is the advantage of it being in the stage? Pipeline, we are extracting the data. What about the stage? What will add? I'm just coming to that. A pipeline is a collection of stages. The first stage in any pipeline brings in data from the dataset source. What is the first stage of any pipeline? This is the stage which brings data into that dataset. Right? Then why would you add more stages? Each stage basically transforms your data. You would add stages to modify your data. Right? Other stages can be added to modify the data within dataset. Why would I add more stages? What is the advantage? Because ultimately I have to modify my data, transform my data, blend my data. And I do that with the help of these stages. right? You can visualize this by considering a pipeline. Let's say this is my pipeline. Right now, this pipeline, it consists of multiple stages. Stage A, which basically imports data into the pipeline. Then stage B transforms the data in some way. Stage C then further transforms the data. Stage B further transforms the data and then outputs that data. Right, a stage basically modifies the data in some manner. Each stage takes the output of the previous stage. Stage A basically imported the data from the source. The output of stage A goes into stage B, which then modifies it. The output of stage B goes into stage C, which further modifies it. The output of stage C goes into stage D. And then, finally, the output of stage D is the output of your overall pipeline. Your pipeline imported data through stage A and outputted the data through stage D. Different data stages, it will try to do this. Different transformations. Stages listed after the first stage in a pipeline take the output of the previous stage as the input and transforms it. Write any subsequent stages which are added after the first stage. They basically take the output of the previous stage, transform it. This takes the output of the previous stage, transform it, and on and forth. The output of your final stage is the output of your pipeline. Right? The output of the final stage is the output of the entire pipeline, which is obviously right. This is my final stage, and its output is basically the output of this whole pipeline. Now let's go to derived dataset. I have once again brought in data from this base dataset, which has created a primary pipeline. Now, the whole purpose I created this derived dataset is that I can modify this data or bring data from other sources as well. And for doing that, I would add a stage. Once again, if I go back to my example, we have company details and we have supervisory details. Company details. Now I have brought into this derived dataset. I also want to bring in these supervisory details. The supervisory details, if I can open this, it is currently in this base dataset. Company details were in base dataset 0.1, which I have imported into DDS 0.1. My supervisor details are in BDS 0.2. If I can quickly open that and show you, this is my supervisory details. Now, how I want to bring both of this data together. Right when I'm bringing data together, I need a common factor. Let's take an example. Let's say I have two different tables. The first table has the worker details. Let's say I have worker name or worker employee ID or worker ID employee name, and let's say their role. ID at total 56 14 3 2 1. My first employee is named as employee 1 and then employee 2. I'm just taking an example just to explain. And let's say my first employee has a role called consultant. Just as an example, the second employee, his role is a manager. Third one is VP or BP, whatever. And he is an EBP. Let's assume this is one table I have. There is another table, let's assume I have, which has the asset details. Now this table, let's just assume, has the asset ID, asset name, and who is assigned that asset. Assigned employee. Let's say there is an asset ID called A1, which is a laptop, and this is currently assigned to employee number 123. Similarly, let's say I have asset A2, which is some keyboard. Just as an example, again, it has been allocated to employee 123, and then asset A1 once again, which is a laptop, which is assigned to 14560. Let's assume asset A3, which is some mouse, just as an example, which is assigned to 145. And then there is some asset A4, which is some server. Obviously, server is not assigned to an employee. It is assigned, allocated on the name of some ad. Now I have two different tables. I want to create a single table to identify which of these employees have which of these assets. When I bring data from two different sources, the only way I can bring this data together is through some common field. If you see from these two tables, the common field is these employee IDs. The employee ID here, it matches the assigned employee here. If there is nothing in common, obviously I can all bring my data together. Which means now I can create a final table. The final table would have these fields from here and these fields from here. I have my employee 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3 here matches to 1, 2, 3 here. I can now copy both of these. Obviously, the second row also is for the first employee. I can copy this. Now I know that the employee 1, 2, 3, whose name is EMP1, who is a consultant, is assigned two assets. One is A1, which is a laptop. Similarly, my employee 456 is assigned this asset. My employee 145 is assigned this asset. Now here, if you see there is no match. This over here, there is no corresponding row over here for employee 3, 2, 1. And similarly, there is no match for this one admin in this table. We'll leave these two here for now. We'll not talk about them, but for all other rows, I have found a match. Now one more thing. What you see is the employee ID here is exactly the same as assigned employee here. Why do you want to show the same columns once again? What I can probably do is decide not to show this column. I can simply remove this column because if you see, this is simply a repetition of the employee ID. Now this is my final table, the employee ID, the name of that employee, the role, the corresponding asset ID, and the asset name. This is how I bring data from different tables, and this is simply called a join. I'm basically joining two different tables. Alright, I'm going to do now. I have data in two different base datasets. The first one was BDS1 company details. The second one BDSO2 supervisor details. And what is that common criteria? That common criteria was employee ID matching to assigned employee. Example, the common criteria is the supervisory sector. Here, if you see the sector which is mobility, energy, IT, life sciences matches the, if I can, the sector here. I would use this common criteria to blend my data together or join my data together. And where would that joining happen? It would happen in the derived dataset that I'm creating. I have already brought in data from BDSO1. Now I need to bring in data from BDSO2 as well. I would click on Add Stage. This is the purpose of the stages. Each stage allows me to do some function, some calculation, some modification, some transformation. The stage type determines what function would I be performing in that stage. Alright, I am joining my data. As I mentioned, join basically brings in data from two different sources. When I join a data workday, I am basically bringing data from different sources. And as I mentioned, for each source, Workday creates a pipeline. Basically, my primary pipeline was automatically created when I created my derived dataset. Now, I'm creating additional pipelines or secondary pipelines. For that, I would select a pipeline. I want to add additional pipeline. What is each pipeline? It is nothing but my dataset. Now my secondary pipeline is the second base dataset, which has the supervisory details. I would search for my second dataset. This is the one and I would select it. When I do that, obviously I'll have to basically say what is that common criteria. Specify that common criteria. What is my matching rows? Specify the conditions that will define this joint. This is my first data and this is my second data. I would say that the common criteria is basically the sector. Here, it maps to the sector here. The moment I do that, this is my joint result. Wherever it says the sector, in the first one maps to the sector in the second one. And then I would basically have to decide which of the fields do I want to include. Right. If you remember, in this final table I said I want to include all the columns of first table, but only two columns of the second table. This I don't need because this is simply a repetition. I would have to do the same thing. From my primary pipeline, I'm saying select all the fields. Right. From my secondary pipeline, on the other hand, I want to select all the fields except for sector because if you see, sector is simply a repetition. That is something I've already selected from my primary pipeline. Now, if you see, my joint result is a table which has the company name, company ID, sector, and parent company. But also it has the supervisory org name, the supervisory Workday ID, the top level organization headcount. This is simply a combination of all the fields which were present in my first pipeline as well as my second pipeline. And now if you see, this is my import stage. We'll have to stop here. We have 10 more minutes. This is my import stage, which brought in data from my base data set. And if you see the output of this import stage, there are those 5 or 6 fields. Company name, company ID, sector parent company ID, and load systems. Now the output of this stage goes into the second stage. Can you correct me? I couldn't follow here. When you added the pipeline after that, how did you get this import and join stage? Import was already there, right? Join I just added. I clicked here and clicked on join. I missed it. Join, it will automatically show you that what are the data is imported there, alright? When I click on any stage, it shows me what data is coming out of that stage. When I click on join, if you see, it shows me there are 15 fields. When I click on import, it shows me there are 7 fields. Because using join, I have joined 2 different tables, right? That's what I did. Just join itself. It will ask you to add what are the tables you want to add. You imported only one table till now, right? How come it will ask you to join with other tables? I have already imported the company details, right? That is already there. Now I want to import another table. Because I didn't. It should show us another table too, right? It can show us another table. Now I have my first table, which is company details. I want to add another one by clicking on join. When you are adding another one, you will join and add. I thought you will first import both of them, then add and join. And then I will directly second the second one. And I would specify how I want to join. Primary pipeline means the condition of joining, or these are 2 different data sources, right? 2 different tables. My primary pipeline is my first table. My second one is the second table which I just imported. Primary pipeline is the table. Alright. The primary pipeline is the first table. The secondary pipeline is the second table. As I mentioned, I don't need the sector. I don't need these load IDs as well. Your question was, how can we hide something? No. I'm good. My question was previously that if any table I have imported, for example, I have import one table. I don't want to see a couple of columns. I don't want to import. In your base database, you have 5 fields. I don't in my import. I don't want to keep a file. I want to keep only 4. How can I? That is something you can do here as well. I said I don't need these load IDs and I simply unselected them. I can say that there is a limitation on the size or what. This is how you can join data from different tables. Please do like, share and subscribe to our channel.